Michelle Obama and CNN just attacked divorced fathers as a way of scoring political points against President Trump. It's beyond shameful, and we'll look at the details. Plus, since it's tax time, let's look at the Trump tax cuts from the perspective of the media. And remember when the Amazon tax cuts were so bad for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Well, those type of tax breaks weren't so bad for her when she was trying to get them for her own business. We'll look at that plus free money for you in California. All that and a whole lot more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, here's an example of absolutely no class by Michelle Obama. And you have to wonder what she's thinking. She's on her book tour, touring the world. She sits down in London with Stephen Colbert, decides to take some shots at President Trump, which we know that's going to happen. But the way she did it and the subject matter is it's beyond bizarre, and it's just absolutely insulting and shameful. So here's a report from the Washington Times, and they go into kind of the background, the setup for it. Former First Lady Michelle Obama took a couple shots at President Trump during a discussion with late-night comedian Stephen Colbert in London, saying America is like a troubled teenager living with divorced dad. The presidency doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are, Mrs. Obama said at the O2 Arena on Sunday while speaking about her husband's tenure in the White House. All right, so yeah, see, typical setup, sits down with one of our American left-wing comedians and is going to take some shots. But here's where it really turned. Without mentioning Mr. Trump by name, the former First Lady compared the U.S. under her husband's successor to a broken family. We come from a broken family. We are a little unsettled, she said, The Independent reported. Sometimes you spend the weekend with divorced dad. That feels like fun, but then you get sick. That is what America is going through. We are living with divorced dad. What in the world does that even mean, we are living with divorced dad? Anytime there's a divorced mom and a divorced dad, and she's basically singling out that all the dads are deadbeats out there, all the moms are great, and never giving any thought whatsoever to the tons of guys out there that are and moms that are doing the best they can when the marriage splits up. It's absolutely outrageous that she'd use this as an example. But then a CNN columnist actually backed her up. Chris Chaliza writes this, and it's just astounding. America is the child of divorced parents. He has been living with the mom for years. He's sick of her rules and doesn't feel like he can have any fun. Enter the divorced dad who seems fun, a little bit reckless, and above all, different. So the kid goes to live with the dad, and it's different, and maybe even good for a few months. Dad lets you stay up late. He doesn't care how much Fortnite you play, doesn't check to make sure your homework is done at night, but over time, the differences start to become less appealing. And when he's got the flu, maybe dad checks on him once or twice, but still winds up going out to dinner with some work friends. All right, that column was labeled under analysis on the CNN website. This is analysis, basically siding with Michelle Obama against divorced fathers across the entire United States. And that's analysis. Opinion journalism is now labeled analysis by CNN. It's absolutely outrageous. And for me, it's very frustrating because although I'm not divorced, I've lived at home. I've been able to work at home since my son was 5 and my daughter was 10. So I know plenty of fathers who have equal parts in raising their children, as most families do, as the mother, and for her to take these shots is outrageous. And maybe the heat kind of came down on CNN throughout the day, because last night they actually did a piece where they kind of questioned Michelle Obama's, intentions or motives, or just her approach to using divorced fathers as her whipping boy for Trump. But even in that, report, it still was cheerleading for Michelle Obama, just questioning her methods. Here's one little part of that clip.
I think it was a really big misstep on her part. I think there are a lot of analogies or labels or metaphors one could use to describe the Donald Trump presidency, its effect on America, a lot of really effective ways to do that. I think, attacking divorced dads in a way is probably not the way to go.
So see, they acknowledge that it was a misstep on Obama's part, but it was a misstep compared to all the other things that she could say against President Trump. And she listed several. And so it's like, man, he's so bad. He's no good. Why would you pick divorced fathers when you can do all of these things? So yeah, they're questioning Michelle Obama, but taking plenty of bashes at Trump as well. And here's another part from that segment.
If somebody who was not Michelle Obama said this, what would happen?
People would be talking about it all over the place. I mean, this is the start of her European tour. She's in London. These are sellout crowds. This is the memoir that people say is going to be the best-selling one of all time. Millions of dollars in book advance. I mean, everyone, if someone else had done this, I think it would have been a much larger gaffe.
Yes, it absolutely would be a much larger gaffe if it came from someone on the right, but it came from Michelle Obama, and that's exactly why I'm covering it, because the media is just going to gloss over it, and for her to attack divorced fathers as if all of them are some kind of deadbeat is absolutely outrageous, and I hope that this story actually picks up some steam, because for her to say that and go unchecked, aside from some little puff analysis or whatever in that CNN segment, it can't go on like that. People have to question this and point out how shameful it is. So we're going to move on now to taxes. Everyone, we had April 15th this week, and the tax man cometh. And a lot of people out there don't even realize that they got a tax cut. And because of the way things were structured, if you recall earlier in the year, a lot of Democrats were saying your tax return is going to be lower, your tax return is going to be lower, and people were all up in arms. Well, that's because the tax laws also changed the withholding. So you might get less back from your refund check, but you had less taken out. Your paychecks were bigger. And yet the media spins this to say that you didn't really get a tax cut. It's only going to the rich. So here is some analysis. The Washington Examiner, they had a columnist who kind of broke apart a New York Times piece that's basically talking about tax cuts. We're going to get into that. But here is what they said in the Washington Examiner. Roughly 65% of Americans paid less last year because of tax reform, while a much, much smaller 6% paid more, according to the Tax Policy Center. The tax preparation group H&R Block also said that roughly 2/3 of its returning customers paid less in taxes in 2018 than they did in the previous year. In fact, only 40% of Americans believe they got a tax cut, while a much smaller 20% say they are certain they got one, according to new data compiled by the New York Times by SurveyMonkey. A separate NBC News Wall Street Journal survey shows only 17% of Americans believe their taxes will be lower following the successful package of the GOP tax reform bill. All right. So then the writer, Beckett Adams over at Washington Examiner, examines this New York Times piece, how these guys are wondering why people think that way. I mean, is it any, clue? Is it any wonder why people don't think they got a tax cut when they actually did? And here's that report. The widespread perception that the tax law did not lead to tax cuts is rather astonishing, considering it is the opposite of reality. So who is to blame for this misleading the public? The Times points an accusing finger at Democrat lawmakers and liberal activist groups. I would suggest the newspaper also take a look in the mirror, and the media was more than happy to amplify or participate in partisan opposition to the tax law. The opinion sections of the Times and Washington Post, for example, have pumped out articles with headlines like "A Tax Plan to Turbocharge Inequality" in 3 charts. Apparently, Republicans want to kick the middle class in the face. And yes, the Senate GOP tax plan would cause thousands to die. And yet these writers in the New York Times actually wonder why people are thinking they didn't even get a tax cut. It's because of the nonstop bombardment by the media that says the tax cuts were bad and actually didn't happen, and you're going to pay more. And it's just absolutely outrageous. And on the note of taxes, it's just really funny, this story that came up, because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went to battle against Amazon. She said, we don't want them here because of their $3 billion in tax breaks, even though those $3 billion were going to lead to $30 billion of stimulus for that region, plus 25,000 jobs just to start. And then there would be more. So she blasted them for a business wanting a tax break. Yet when she was starting her own business or trying to start her own business, she wanted the exact same kind of tax breaks. And here's a report from Washington Examiner that dives into that. Ocasio-Cortez, who graduated from Boston University in 2011, today calls herself a democratic socialist. But in 2012, she was a businesswoman seeking tax benefits for her startup, Brook Avenue Press, which published books and curricula for children in the Bronx. Plenty of entrepreneurs have started their businesses on a shoestring, and any break they receive means more flexibility for future growth, Ocasio-Cortez said in a 2012 in a news release. A tax break could mean part-time work for someone else or keeping a business's doors open long enough to turn a profit. Young entrepreneurs are playing a special role in developing promising creative enterprises for our future, and a small break can open up their resources for hiring, creating new product, or reinvesting in the local community, Ocasio-Cortez added. So she seems to be hitting on all the points of why Amazon would have been good for that district. She talks about reinvesting in the community. She talks about hiring. All right, and that's a tax break for her for a small business. What Amazon was going to bring was hiring 25,000 people and bringing $30 billion to the economy. And back then, it was great for her, but now that she's front and center media attention, not so good for Amazon. So just more hypocrisy. It just goes on and on. So finally, I want to talk about this story. You know, the left has been pushing some radical stuff, and you hear about it because all the presidential candidates have adopted it. Medicare for all, free tuition for all. You know, Ocasio-Cortez in her Green New Deal wants to pay people who don't even want to work, right? Okay, well, that idea is part of a pet project, a test project in Stockton, California. And they want to pay people with no strings attached. Just give them money and see what they do. Just free taxpayer money. And here's that report. The city of Stockton, California, which launched a universal basic income pilot program earlier this year, will listen to stories from a select group of recipients of a no strings attached cash by the end of April, adding tangible anecdotes to the national political conversation on income inequality ahead of 2020. The Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, a pilot program on universal basic income, launched in February, the Los Angeles Times reported. Over 100 residents from the city's lower income neighborhoods will be administered $500 a month via debit cards for the next year and a half. The money comes without any restrictions, such as requiring recipients to be employed or maintain sobriety. So did you catch that? No restrictions at all. So they can buy beer, cigarettes, you name it, and it's just taxpayer money going. But there's a little bit more to that because some of these folks will be tracked or documented over the course of it. And here's that little part. Head of Stockton's program, Suki Samra, told the Los Angeles Times that 25 participants dubbed storytellers will offer their experiences on how the extra monthly cash has contributed to their lives. While the data from the program's research findings won't be available until 2021, Samra expects anecdotes resonate more with voters who could hear the potential effects of their political decisions. All right, so right there you have it, that you can bet that these storytellers won't be the ones blowing the money on beer and wine and cigarettes and whatever. I have a feeling there'll be some pretty good stories, all to support this left's narrative that socialism is the way to go, which we all know it's not. Folks, that's our show for today. Please subscribe. Please tell your friends about it and have a great day. We'll see you next time. I'm Bobby Eberly. This is a 13-minute news hour.